So right now, I'm in front of our office building in downtown Fort Worth. And now I'm at the lake, and it only took 15 minutes to get here. And in this video, we're gonna be covering one of Fort Worth's biggest landmarks that happens to be its best kept secret. So I'm currently walking through Marina Park. Marina Park is a tucked away little bit of greenery in a residential area on the north side of Fort Worth. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's a really nice place to be, decently well kept, no foot traffic like whatsoever. I think there's like one other dude here, and I'm just trying not to scare his fish away. It's just some park in a bend off of some lake that most people don't even pay any mind to. And much of that could also be said about the lake that it's on, and that's Lake Worth. And I know some of you guys who may be local to the area may scoff a little bit, because there's not much to Lake Worth, to be perfectly honest. It's fed by Eagle Mountain Lake, which is a larger lake to the north. There's Lake Worth, the city, which is right next to it, which isn't super glamorous either. But I think that's kind of part of what makes it so special, honestly, is the fact that if you take a second and stop and listen, there's nothing. There's some birds, there's some wind, there's me flapping my gums, but there's no noise here. It's nice, it's quiet, it's peaceful, it's like a fisherman's delight. And as a matter of fact, I think the only people I've seen in my time around the Lake Worth area today have been people fishing. Mind you, it's like, 12 o'clock on a Wednesday. Not too many people are coming out of their way to go to the lake to do much else, but I think that's kind of the big draw to the area, and as I've seen, a lot of people seem to think so as well. There were plenty of people fishing, a lot of people just sitting, strolling along the edge of the water, and I think that's really indicative of this body of water in general, because whenever people think of this area of the Trinity River, they don't really think about much, and I mean that in the best of ways. It's unassuming in a great way, in that whenever we talk about lakes, we're always talking about partying or boating or all the crazy houses you can buy on it. And honestly, this isn't really that, but I think people miss the value of Lake Worth just because of its proximity to the city. And I think that in and of itself is also valuable. So Lake Worth is very different from the rest of the lakes around the DFW area. It's more the kind of lake where you see kids flying kites or old men with metal detectors walking around, less so than some of the other lakes where you have all this partying and water sport activity and things like that. And that's not a bad thing. Like, not every lake has to be party central. A lot of people want good, nice, quiet places to go sit and relax with their family, let the kids play, maybe go fishing, something like that. And I feel like Lake Worth is really overshadowed by a lot of these flashier lakes in the area. And notably for like good reason. Like Granbury has these really cool amenities and things like that. Joe Pool is enormous, tons of boating in that area. But Lake Worth is kind of unassuming, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times, you don't always need an F1 car. Sometimes you just need a Honda Civic to get you from point A to point B. And I feel like Lake Worth really fits the bill in that department. But it also has a lot of cool things that make it more valuable than even some of the people who come here regularly make it out to be. So one of the really cool things about Lake Worth is the fact that it is an older part of Fort Worth. And I mean, don't get me wrong, all of Fort Worth is old. It's like almost 200 years old at this point. Founded like 1800 or something. But Lake Worth specifically it has an older feel to it. Like, it's got a lot more of that old bungalow style housing, those older segmented floor plans, things like that are reminiscent of the time period in which they were built. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it has made it a very difficult market for developers to break into. They've started doing so more recently with the advent of some of the things, like on the other side of Azle, there's a bunch of houses that are going over there. There's the Overlook by Village Homes, Marine Creek Estates, First Texas Homes, all that jazz. A lot of developers have really been pushing to get houses up in this area because it is cheaper to build out here. And on top of that, Lake Worth is honestly a really nice lake. It's like a constant level lake. You don't have to worry about a lot of the crazy party stuff because it is such a nice and quiet area. It's more communal than a lot of other lakes. But I think it's honestly a really good thing, because before now, there wasn't really a lot of opportunities for people to get properties on this lake. Well, I mean, not just like new properties, but properties in general, because a lot of this stuff was very under the table, considering the culture and the way that Fort Worth is. Everything's very, very relaxed, very casual and informal, and it's made it very difficult for developers to actually start building newer houses out here. But with the advent of these newer neighborhoods, a lot of people who had absolutely no opportunity to move into communities like this are now seeing not just an opportunity, but also one where they can get a low maintenance new house as well.
So one of the intangible draws of the Lake Worth area, especially when it comes to finding a place to live, is the fact that they have much more lax zoning regulations in this area. So one of the upsides of Lake Worth is the fact that you can actually build on the lake. A lot of lakes have 25 to 50, maybe 100 feet or something like that before you can actually start building property. So you can't actually build, like, say, a dock house or something. But Lake Worth actually does allow it. And in some of these areas, people clamor for the ability to do so. So with situations like what we have here, which I think this is a really interesting situation. On some of the streets, the area between the street and the lake isn't big enough to put a house and a dock house or a dock. So what they opt to do in a lot of cases is they will build their houses along one side of the road, and then on the side of the road that actually faces the lake itself, they will dedicate that piece of land to either a dock or like a boat launch or lift or something like that for all of their toys, which I think is a really creative and interesting way to divvy up your land. But it also means that you have this weird legal situation where you have the easement of the road going through multiple properties in some cases. So their lot lines are kind of split too, with one side being on the lake and one side being in.
Now, this doesn't have anything to do with lakes or Lake Worth or anything, honestly. I just happened across an old let's see, wood mounting nail, probably for like a hardwood floor or something like that. It reminded me of the idiom dead as a doornail, and I wanted to kind of impart some knowledge on you guys, because a lot of people say that and don't really know what it means. But back in say 17th or 18th century, I forgot when it was, there was a playwright that had made a note of it, and that's when they first started saying it. But the term comes from the fact that it used to be really difficult to make nails back then, so what they would do is they would reuse them in carpentry, with one notable exception, and that's whenever they were making doors. So whenever they nailed doors together to keep from having a giant swinging wooden spiked covered thing swinging around in your house, what they would do is they would take the protruding end that came through the wood and they would nail it flat, so that way that it didn't point up, it would just like point back into the wood. The unfortunate part about that is then the nail was not usable anymore. You couldn't pull it out of the door, you couldn't straighten it to reuse it in something else, so the nail was effectively dead, and therefore it was dead as a doornail. So right now I'm in Plover Circle Park, which is some local park and neighborhood that most people will never actually go to. But it has a really cool locale, and that locale is also kind of part of the reason why there has been a serious lack of drone footage in this video, and that's because we are directly across Lake Worth from JRB Fort Worth, and JRB stands for Joint Reserve Base, which is the military reserve base that we have here in the northwest corner of Fort Worth. They have a flight line over here, and that's military speak for a runway for planes, and this is actually the landing side of the runway, so the planes come in from this direction to go land on the runway at the base. And it's really cool because the people around here call it the sound of freedom, but what it really is the sound of F-35s flying overhead. You get everything from like C-130s to Hornets to Super Hornets. We got a couple of Tomcats still flying around, I'm sure. A bunch of really cool planes come in and out of this area that most people will never see, and it's not so often as to be intrusive, but it is often enough that when your kid's outside playing, they're likely to catch a glimpse of it and point up at the sky and be like, "Mommy, look at that really cool airplane." All right, so aside from being one of the... Oh, hey, look. It's the sound of freedom. All right, so here I'm right outside of Scenic Point, which is a, well, I mean, obviously it's a scenic point here on the south side of Lake Worth. And most people don't know about this little vantage here, but it is pretty cool. As you can see behind me, you can see a lot of the lake. You've got all of these developments over here. You've got the dam here, the base here. So actually in that last shot where we were at the end of the runway, JRB is right over there, all of that stuff you see in the background there. And this dam here is actually responsible for Lake Worth. So Lake Worth normally wouldn't exist. It is a man-made lake and it is a constant level lake. And what does that mean? Man-made in the fact that it is actually just a river that we have essentially built up water in because of this dam. This dam needed to be here so we could build all sorts of infrastructure where downstream used to be. There's a ton of, there's Sansom Park, there's parts of Northside. So a lot of homes, industry development has gone down in that area, and that dam is responsible for making sure that it was possible. It's also responsible for making sure that that the water flowing in from Eagle Mountain Lake to the north of Lake Worth, which is where Lake Worth gets its water, is kept at a constant level, because people can build on Lake Worth. As you probably saw in a couple of the clips earlier in the video, there were people who had docks directly on the waterfront of their property, which is not necessarily every lake. And the reason they can do it on this lake is because they keep that lake level relatively at a constant level. So it has a parameter that the lake level can be within, and with the flow coming in from Eagle Mountain Lake to the north and the flow going out from this dam here, they can make sure that it stays at a reasonable level for the people who live on the lake, for the people who use the lake for everything from recreation to resources. And that's one of the really cool things about Lake Worth, is it's not just a place to go hang out and have a fun time with the kids. It's also integral to the heart of Fort Worth. Without it, I don't feel like Fort Worth would be the same as it is today. So right now I'm actually walking through a little neighborhood called Lake Vista. It's just one of your stereotypical cookie cutter suburbs. Nothing crazy, but the cool part about this is right off of Las Vegas Trail here, this neighborhood is actually right next to the lake. So just on the other side of this row of houses is a little loop drive, and then you're right there on the lake. And that's really cool for, I mean, a multitude of reasons, but on top of that, the fact that I've been showing you guys a lot of these older houses that are on the lake. I've been talking about how old the Lake Worth area is, and I wanted to show off some of the newer stuff, because this development is early 2000s, I want to say, and so it's still fairly modern. There are newer ones, mind you, but I wanted to just show off some of the pre-existing ones as well. And these houses look nice. They're all brick sided. They've got modern architecture, stone water lines, like the works. You get a lot of amenities that you wouldn't get with a lot of these older homes and things like that. And I just like being able to show off that these things do exist. As much as I talk about the heritage and culture and like how old the Fort Worth area is as a whole, or Lake Worth specifically in this case, that doesn't mean that you have to get an old house. Doesn't mean you have to get like a shiplap bungalow that's like older than you are. You can get nicer, newer houses still and be right next to the lake. One of the other really cool things about this neighborhood is that it is right across from the Fort Worth Mounted Patrol Depot. So obviously, in Fort Worth, we have police, we have sheriffs, we even have like a lake division. Like Lake Worth has their own law enforcement specifically for boating and people violating laws on the lake and to keep them safe. But one of the really cool things about Fort Worth is that we still have mounted patrols, and like I'm talking like horse mounted patrols. So we still have horse cops. We have cops that, you know, they wear the 10-gallon hat. They've got like that whole Desperado Texas Ranger look. They all ride horses. They're all trained to ride horses. And the division or the depot for them is actually right outside the front entrance of this place. And I think that's really cool, because you can drive by here. These guys every day on their way to and from work get to see you know, the cops out there training in the corral and everything. getting ready for their aptitude tests, or just, to bust some dude who thinks he can outrun a freaking horse. Honestly, I just think it's cool, and I wanted to point that out. But yeah, we got one of those. All right, guys, so we're here at The Point, which is actually a restaurant here right outside of JRB Fort Worth. It's right next to the hydroelectric plant. Bit of a hole in the wall, really, but it is open to the public, luckily. The main reason I came here is because they do have a great view of part of the lake right here. One of the bends actually goes right around where the restaurant settled on this little raised area. So they've got a pretty cool vantage point here. But I kind of wanted to wrap everything up and just get y'all's opinion on things, because I know I've gone one way or the other. I've talked about Lake Worth being, a hidden gem. I've talked about it being old. I've talked about it having new architecture, old architecture, things like that. And so I really want to get y'all's opinion. What do you guys think? Is this the type of lake that y'all would consider moving to, or do you guys look for more stereotypical recreational lakes whenever you guys are thinking of waterfront property? I'd like to know. It's something we're really curious about, but I would like to leave you with this and say that while Lake Worth may not be for everybody, for the type of person who's looking for this experience, there is none other. I've been all across the U.S., everything from Bangor, Maine to Havelock, North Carolina, San Diego, San Francisco, Oklahoma, you name it, and I haven't found a vibe quite like I have here in the Lake Worth area. So if you feel like you're missing something and you need a little bit of a lake living in your life, this might be the place to go. I appreciate you guys watching. This one's been a fun video. I've come to learn a lot about Lake Worth myself, doing research on this, just driving around, seeing a lot of the really cool things that, even being a Fort Worth local, you don't get any insight on until you just immerse yourself in this kind of lifestyle. So if you guys learned something, give us a thumbs up. Hey, there it is, Sound of Freedom. You gotta love it. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching the video. If you're thinking about buying or selling, remember, keep calm and call Tom.